Alright, this is that blue 68 custom Deluxe reverb now that has been de-stupidified. And it still has tremolo and reverb on both channels, but it's no longer a noisy way of doing that. The custom channel, which they market as having the Bassman tone stack. Bassman tone stack, dude. You know, first of all, which Bassman? There are like 10 plus models. You know, 57 Bassman, a 58 Bassman, a 63 Bassman, a 65 Bassman, 67 Bassman, a 75 Bassman, etc., etc. Well, I'll tell you, while they probably mean the 58 through 60 5F6 tweed narrow panel Bassman, the one that everyone wants, those who don't want the twin version, narrow panel twin, no Bassmans had that tone stack in the circuit where this thing had it. And this thing is not a Bassman. Doesn't have a Bassman gain structure, doesn't have the Bassman frequency response, harmonic content, output section, and it's not a Bassman tone stack. They're lying to you. It is a 100 nanofarad film cap and a 22 film cap, the 100 for the bass, the 22 for the mids. That's the only thing it has in common, really. And a 250 picofarad bright cap has a 100K slope resistor, not the 56K from a Bassman. It's plate driven, not the cathode follower of the tweed Bassman. It's got a 250K audio taper bass pot, not the 1 meg. It doesn't have a 25K mids pot. It did in stock form have 25K of resistance in the mids, but it was just a straight resistance, not wired as variable like it is in the Bassman. So that's like having a Bassman, tweed Bassman with the mids always on 10. It's the worst possible sound. So I took out the marketing stuff, and now this channel is the pretty much a super reverb. And this channel is the Deluxe reverb with a mids pot here, which lets it get the Deluxe reverb sound, the twin sound, which has more scooped in the mids, and then some extra grit if you want. I've got tremolo and reverb on both channels. I'll show that in full on the real playing video tomorrow. All the hiss is gone because it does not have the crazy output without negative feedback. It actually will have reverb depth now because I changed the 1.5K reverb mixer resistor to the stock 470K that AB763 ought to have. Anyway, here's the normal channel. And again, this will be more impressive when you have the tremolo and reverb on it tomorrow. So that's nice. Let's turn the tremolo on. I don't have the foot switch hooked up, but one of these ought to do it. Let's see. What's going on with that? Oh, duh, Lyle. Sorry, sometimes I are too smart. The tremolo is much more audible if you have intensity turned up, isn't it? There it goes. So we're on the normal channel, has tremolo, and the tremolo is also on the vibrato channel, which really needs to be relabeled when you have vibrato on both channels. So. And they both have reverb too, so. Now, like I said, on the normal channel, it's now the AB763 Super Reverb. This is the AB763 Twin Reverb preamp now because I have a mids pot. And the Twin had a 10K audio taper pot. When it was at noon, you know, about 5.5, it was about 1 or 2K, which would sound something like this. The Deluxe Reverb's got about a 7K, which would sound like this about 11 o'clock. That'll be more audible when I do the real test with the real mic tomorrow. But that's the behavior from 1 to 10 on a twin is the behavior of this mid spot from 7 o'clock to noon. From noon to 5 o'clock, you get into more mid-range, including boost. So it's a very versatile mid spot in the back. About 10 o'clock, almost 11, is the stock Deluxe Reverb. Down from there, just a little bit below 9 o'clock, is pretty much what you have with noon on a twin or the left channel of a Super Reverb. Guitar's a lot out of tune. Anyway, so it's got new filter caps, same as on the 65 reissue I showed a couple weeks back. It's got the majority of its coupling caps replaced with Panasonic ECQs. They look kind of like the original Illinois capacitors in there. The Illinois are these slightly fatter ones, and in non-critical places it still has the Illinois. In critical spots, including on the underside of the POTS board, it's got these Panasonics, which sound better. I moved the screen grid resistors to the output tubes. I moved the heater balance resistors to the output tubes, and I connected the filament wires, the heater wires, directly to the output tubes, removing the heater balance resistors that are on the board, removing the fuse that was on the board, and cutting the wires that went from the board heater supply to the output tubes. The grid stoppers are still on the board because this thing needed to have a budget. And these things are pretty stable, even with the grid stoppers there, because they're not that far from the tube. I removed that stupid 22 ohm resistor there in the bias because it's designed to be fusible. You never want the bias supply to go out on you, ever, ever, ever. That's not something you want fused. I need to put a little cable tie here to secure the bias wires to that hole in the slot. I've got the shielded cable here to the back, to the pot on the rear panel for the mids. Got a shielded cable here from the output of the volume wiper on this channel straight to pin 7 of V2, bypassing the stuff on the board. That's all been cut out to lower the noise floor. I did a much better circuit to blend the reverb and tremolo. You can see that on Rob Robinette's site, which is excellent. Rob's a nice guy. Got some good info on there, including a few things that I contributed. If you look at the previous video of this, remember this thing had a noise floor from hell with both volumes off. Now with both volumes off, you can barely tell that the amp is on. And I'm going to reunite it with its speaker tomorrow, and we'll do a real test with a real mic. You'll hear all this stuff better, including what the mids really sound like, because the cell phone mic can only pick up so much. It has 2 new preamp tubes from V1 and V2. As you can see in the first video on this amp, it had some preamp tube issues. And I got all that done, and then I discovered that this output tube was microphonic, the JJ that was in there. And so that is gone. They're here. I'll return them as spares. I did not have to rebias the amp. It works just fine with this bias level. But one of these is microphonic. So these will be the spares. It's got a new pair of electro-harmonic 6v6s. I have found, at least in the last several months, that the electro-harmonic 6v6s tend to be the most reliable. And the JJs can be great in a lot of amps, but in hang-down combos especially, they often become microphonic, as these have. So tomorrow you'll get a chance to really hear this thing being put through its paces. Oh, a couple other little things to mention. Right here, the input to the phase inverter, that's now a ceramic cap instead of a film cap. And the film cap, I'm sorry, the ceramic disc cap feeding the reverb in the stock amps, that cap often develops noise issues. So I replaced it with a higher quality one. Same for the 250 picofarad caps on the treble, treble caps in the tone stacks on both channels. And on the volumes and input jacks on both channels, I removed all the lead-free solder and put in Kester 6040 because it holds up to any stress much better than the lead-free stuff that they use from the factory. And unlike the factory job, every bit of hardware in this amp is now tight. I've never had one come from the factory with all the hardware tight. So if you have one of these, you can probably do yourself a huge favor. Just go in there and make sure all your transformer bolts are tight. Make sure all the nuts on the jacks are tight. The nuts on the input jacks are tight. Speaker and input jack. If you feel up to it, get a very small flathead screwdriver. Take all the knobs off. Make sure all the pots are tight. Put the knobs back on. And there's a little line on the top of the chassis. That's a line that turn the pot all the way counterclockwise. Align the one with that little line on the chassis. Then tighten the nut. The little set screw. It drives me nuts how many amps come in where there's no relation from one knob to the next because they were put on in different places. So they could all say 5 all in a row and you'd have wildly different settings on the pots. You need to have the same relationship from 1 to 10 on each knob. Please, 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 people. A few things I forgot to cover. The 4 plate resistors on V1 and V2, I've replaced those because I've had them fail. Not very commonly, but I've had enough failures in these that these got replaced. There's that new cap feeding the reverb. Now a note on these Panasonics versus the IC caps. The IC caps do not sound bad. I think the Panasonics sound better. Now this is not some extreme cork sniffery. This is not a $7 Jupiter cap. The Panasonics, depending on the value, in 630 volt range, they go from 40 cents to $1. The majority of these were like 40 to 70 cents. So they're really easy to change out. They're inexpensive. I was ordering stuff anyway. I think all the caps in this amp added maybe $3 to it. Didn't really affect the labor time much at all. So it's a no-brainer. They sound better, and I know what's on the spec sheet on these. This is a 1 watt here on the reverb mixer because I didn't have a 470K half watt. Need to order a couple hundred of those. Crucially, the negative feedback resistor has been changed to the proper 820 ohms, and there's the new ceramic disc cap on the input to the phase inverter. That does make a difference. These 2 resistors here are the 220K grid leaks or bias leaks in the output. I've had these resistors fail from the factory. You never want a bias leak to fail. So new half watts. My half watt carbon film, I think these are, what is it, Yageo? I used to use Zycons for these, but Zycons have gone up in price at Mauser unless you order 1,000. Sometimes I use Yageos now, sometimes I use Koha Spears. I've still got a big stash of the Zycons from previous orders. This is the stock half watt. This is my new half watt. And I know the specs on this. I suspect these are much lower voltage rating with a poor temperature coefficient. I know this is good. I've got straight wire here where that 22 ohm used to be in the bias. I replaced the grid stoppers for the same reason I replaced these 2, just because I have had failures, which is an odd thing to fail, which tells me how cheap some of those half watts were. So that's pretty critical. Some straight bus wire there where the old screen resistors were, new 3 watts mounted at the tube socket. You can see here where the heater wires used to go to those quick connects. This is where the heater balance resistors used to be. Now they're here, so if they fail, they don't burn the board. They're easy to swap back out. And the heater wires are going straight to the octal here, as God and Leo intended. So, I don't recommend that most people do this themselves, but if you, most techs know how to do most of this already. And if you're very, very nice, and don't say, this guy on the internet says you have to do it this way, say, you know, I'm really interested in getting this work done. Would you mind taking a look at this video and see if you agree with it? Or find some politic way to say it. Because no one wants to be told that some guy on the internet is trying to tell them how to do their job. And especially as it often gets translated from me to the other tech via the musician in between. Things get changed, garbled, misunderstood, and you know, it's a small tech world and we all want to stay friends.